Hebrews that he has begun. And so I got with most of the elders Sunday and said, okay, where are we going to go for a temporary study? And the two I was with both immediately said James. So here we are. So we'll try to look at the book of James a little bit. And as an introduction, who is this guy? That's the first question we've got to ask. We read of three Jameses in the New Testament. James, son of Alphaeus, the brother of John. Of course, he will be the first apostle to die. And he will die fairly early in the history of the church. Secondly, we have the one that is called James the Less. Two Jameses within the apostles. We kind of lose track of him through the course of the New Testament. And so, probability is that he is not right. And so our third alternative is James, the half-brother of the Lord. And he seems to fit our bill very well. He will become, if you read through the book of Acts, a leader in the church in Jerusalem. In fact, in Galatians 1 and 2, he's going to be called by Paul, one of the pillars in the church. So he was quite an influential individual. Most people believe that he was an elder in the church of Jerusalem. And this seems to fit a man that is working with a primary Jewish church, writing a book to Jews. And so this tends to tell us that the book of James is probably very early in the list chronologically of New Testament books. There is some debate whether this is earlier than Galatians or vice versa, but obviously this would be a very early book because the further Christianity develops, the fewer Jews become involved in Christianity. Now, why do I say it's a Jewish book? Because the rest of verse 1 says, to the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad, greet. Now, the term that is used most often for this is diaspora, the scattering. Now, question, do we even know where the 10 tribes are? Not really. We have no idea. They don't come back. We would have some knowledge of Judah and Benjamin as they will return from Babylonian captivity. But these other tribes would have been scattered throughout the Roman world at that time. And so wherever these Jews are, whoever these Jews are, James is writing to them. And he doesn't spend a lot of time with flowery introductions or anything else. He just calls himself a bondservant of Christ, which Paul calls himself a slave, Peter calls himself a slave. So it's a very common term in the early church as these writers refer to their relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, the one unique thing about James, the half-brother of the Lord, is at least during part of Jesus' ministry, James nor any of his brothers believed in Jesus. They didn't accept him. It will be after the resurrection before they will accept Jesus. So the point I want you to get here is the resurrection is really going to change the lives of a whole lot of these individuals who have or have not followed Jesus in his earthly ministry. So we have a skeptic turned believer who writes to his own people, the Jews. Now, I'm sure as Lloyd gave an introduction to the book of Hebrews, obviously, by the very title of that book, it too was written to Jews. There seem to be very, very different purposes. Hebrews seems to be written to a bunch of Jews who were thinking about going back to Judaism. The book of James is a book that is actually written to encourage people to do what Christ wants them to do. Now, a couple of things about the book. Luther almost did not put the book in his German New Testament. Because Luther was a strong advocate of faith only. And as we get into chapter 2, we're going to find out rather quickly that James is not an advocate of faith only. Now, he is not an advocate of meritorious works that earn our way into heaven. But he is definitely not a faith-only individual. And so that caused Luther a great deal of trouble, as it did some of the other early Protestant leaders. Okay, as I say, excuse me, James gets down to business really quick. Verse 2. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. Now, he's not saying when you go out here and you create the situation, but as you are going along through life, as you live your life day by day, obviously, even as Christians, we're going to encounter certain things. Many of them may not be very pleasant for us. And yet, this sounds almost strange. Consider it all joy. Because there can be a greater good and a purpose that can be accomplished by these various trials. They can make us stronger. They can make us better. Somebody was telling me the other day, and I forgot who the football player is, but when he was in high school, he started running, and when he would run, he would drag a tire behind him. Now, I can assure you, if you've ever done that, you're going to use a whole lot more energy, but you're also going to develop a whole lot more strength. Well, as that car tire got too easy for him to drag, he went to a bigger tire. And then finally, by the time he got into college and was approaching pro ball, he was actually dragging a tractor tire. I don't know about you, but I'm, not wildly going to go out and start dragging tractor tires around. But the way this individual was described to me, he is this hulking mass of human being and quite fast as a result of doing all this. Now, as with trials sometimes, when we go through difficulties, when we have to overcome obstacles, when we have to navigate through very, very difficult waters, many times that makes us a better Christian. And it also equips us to be able to help other Christians who may be navigating similar things. Now, we'd all love it if Christianity were just a wonderful bed of rose petals and we had no problems, but let's realize rose bushes have thorns. So does life. And so we can look at these things and we can get mad and we can stay mad and we can be counterproductive to ourselves because we do get mad, or we could consider it, okay, this is an opportunity to grow. This is an opportunity to develop. And so he goes on in verse 3, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Endurance. Well, the Hebrew writer's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about our need for endurance in chapter 12. That we lay off every weight and the sin that so easily besets us and run with endurance the race that is set before us. Christianity is not a sprint. It's not a 100-yard dash. No, it's going to be a marathon. When we become a Christian until we die, we're in the race. And so it may be a very, very long distance race. And we've got to be able to endure. We've got to be able to put up with the various things that not only Satan, but life itself is going to throw at us. And so this testing of our faith helps produce that endurance in our lives. In verse 4 he says, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Well, the worst thing you want in a high school football team is a team that runs out of energy every time they get to the fourth quarter. You don't win ball games, generally speaking, playing 3 quarters of the 4-quarter football game. And so coaches have to work on endurance and whatnot. And sometimes there's quite a bit of, well, coach, this is ridiculous or whatever. But then as the players begin to get stronger and are able to play the full game, they realize how important developing those skills and being able to use those skills all the way through the ball game were important for them. And so with Christ, with Christianity, with the race we're in, it's going to take endurance. Now, when I coached track, I had a phrase for my distance runners. I would talk about a lot of times you could see a distance runner and it would just be like they almost went into slow motion. And of course the phrase is the bear is on their back. You know, they've kind of lost their wind and they haven't developed that second wind yet. And so the race becomes a tremendous drudgery. Well, sometimes our race can be a drudgery. We keep announcing about people that have been dealing with long-term illnesses and so on. That gets you down after work. That gets to be difficult. That's a drudgery. And these people can look at life and say, well, all right, God's turned against me. God doesn't love me anymore. I'm going to give up on God, or they hang in there. When I taught high school, I can't do it at Cap State. I'd probably have one if I could. But when I taught high school, on the back wall of my classroom, I had a picture of a cat, Miss Margie, holding on, you've probably seen it, holding on to a limb with its front claws, and it said, hang in there, baby, Friday's coming. And, you know, of course, the students would look at that, and say, you mean you want out here on Friday as much as we do? And usually my response was, more so. Because I have to put up with you. But there are things we have to endure. Sometimes long-term illnesses of someone we love. Interpersonal relationships. And sometimes these things can last a long, long time. We as humans tend not to be very forgiving and definitely not very forgetful sometimes. And so we can make these little bumps in the road major mountains and make them drag on and on and on and on instead of just getting over them and going up. Because once we get this endurance and we pursue Christ with endurance, this will help us become more and more complete in becoming a child of God. Okay, verse 5. We change topics a little bit. And this is written to all of us, verse 5 here. This is not some special group within the church or anything. But if any of you, the whole church, lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Now, we have a whole book in the Bible that is generally called wisdom. What is that particular book? Proverbs. Okay, so it is considered to be wisdom literature. Little side note, Proverbs convinces me that the Bible is inspired. Because Solomon didn't practice half of what he wrote in there. He put it down. It was correct. He just didn't do it. Okay, so we can ask God for wisdom. By the way, who started off as king asking God for wisdom? Solomon. God gave it to him generously. You go through and you read Kings and Chronicles, and Solomon was probably the most sought after wisdom celebrity in his day and time. People were coming from all over to ask him questions and see what was going on and to learn from him.
The Bible says that he would be the wisest man of his age or any age to come. It's something like that anyway.
Yeah.
So,
So, yes, very definitely he was, and yet there are many times in his life there were gaps in that wisdom, lapses in it for sure. But God doesn't begrudge giving us wisdom. Now, I will tell you, I don't normally share a lot about my prayer life. I don't want to impose things I do in prayer on everybody else. But two things I pray for very often. Number one, wisdom for myself. Because I'm a fellow that's got to get up lessons week after week after week. And when I come along and somebody walks out after a lesson, man, I needed that one. Then I think, okay, that prayer got answered this week, sure, we're in good shape. The other one is, I pray just about as often that the eldership here can have wisdom as well. Because we live in a changing world, and sadly, elderships in the brotherhood are sometimes having to confront things that, I'll be real honest, when I first started preaching, I guess I was the most naive human on earth. I never thought these things would come around, and yet many of them have. And so we have to have wisdom, because we're shepherding God's sheep. You guys don't belong to us. You're not our sheep. You belong to God. You're Christ's sheep. He knows you by name. He simply entrusted you into our care. And we need to be very careful about how we use that. A congregation Jennifer and I attended, as they were doing their jumping around in the Atlanta area, trying to find a solid congregation over there. They had 2 men serving as elder in name only. And I won't go into more detail than that, but obviously they were only in name only. And they decided they needed to appoint more elders, and so they were going to get one man that his oldest child was 6 years old. Now, I think there's something about believing children in those qualifications. The other one had no children whatsoever. And I suggested to Jennifer, of course, people were leaving the congregation like water flowing through a sieve, and I suggested, I said, have those elders read Ezekiel chapter 34. Because they're going to stand before God and they're going to answer to that chapter for allowing God's sheep to be scattered. That's not what elders do. We're not hirelings that Jesus talked about in John 10. And so, of all people on earth, elders need wisdom. I pray for our parents that they would have wisdom. Because, again, we live in a crazy world. And we have parents that have to teach children things my parents didn't have to teach me, because that wasn't a part of society back then. But it is now. And so our parents need so much wisdom. But you don't just have to have me or the other elders praying for you to be able to have wisdom. You've got a 24-hour access line, and God will freely grant it to you. But here is a prayer that we have a condition put on. But he must ask in faith without any doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. In other words, if you're going to go to God, you're going to pray to God for wisdom, you better believe he's going to give it to you. Don't sit there, well, God, I hope maybe you might sometime get around to giving me a little wisdom, and I would, Of course, really, we could condemn that kind of prayer for anything, whatever it might be, not just wisdom or whatever. We need to pray in faith.
What was the prayer that atheist, maybe it was the French.
Voltaire.
Voltaire said on his deathbed, God, if there is a God, be merciful to my soul if I have a soul.
By the way, Voltaire did not pray that. He said to have prayed.
Right.
All kinds of...
preachers quoted it, but anyway.
Yeah, they did. I actually had to do a research paper on Voltaire with one of my professors at Middle, because he wanted the preacher to do the paper on Voltaire. Thank you, Dr. Crawford, so much. Voltaire talked about a lot of things. He talked about the accursed thing, and people say that was his view of Christianity. No, that was his view of the persecuting Catholic Church. He despised that. If you read Voltaire's literature, you will find that there was a Christian group in his lifetime that he was totally sympathetic toward every single time he writes about it. The Anabaptists. Every time he mentions the Anabaptists, man, they're up in the stratosphere. Everybody else may be down in the dregs with their fussing, fighting, and persecuting, and of course realize the Anabaptists were generally pacifists, so they're not in the persecuting business. They got persecuted, but they weren't in the business. But Voltaire is in sympathy to them. But
my point was, that is a prayer that absolutely does not have faith behind it.
no,
That would be an example of praying and not being.
right. Well, you know, the story of a woman had a big mound of dirt in her backyard, and she wanted it gone. She couldn't get anybody to move it. So she prayed God to move the mound of dirt, and the next morning she got up, looked, it was still there. She said, I knew you weren't going to move it.
So she called Randy and,
No, did you get it moved, Randy, finally? Well, there you go. Don't pray prayers like that. If you don't trust God to answer your prayers, don't pray about it. Don't pray about it. Okay, so don't doubt God. That's what James is really telling us here. Don't doubt God. And then verse 7, for that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. There is a story told. You can take it as fact, you can take it as one of those, there is a story told. But during the siege at Petersburg, during the War of Northern Aggression, there was a soldier that decided he wanted to get home. He was tired of the war and he wanted to go home. And so he took a Union uniform and cut it in half. And took a Confederate uniform and cut the jacket in half. Pants wouldn't necessarily make that much difference because Confederates pretty much wore whatever they get their hands on. And he sewed the two jackets together. And then started out right through the middle of the two armies. The blue jacket toward the Union, the gray jacket toward the Confederacy. And according to the story, it worked fairly well until everybody started cheering him as some kind of hero. And when he turned to acknowledge the cheers, he got shot from both sides. Well, that's your unstable, double-minded person. You're going to get shot from both sides. And we don't want to be there. We want to be people who explicitly trust that when we put our cares and our petitions and so on in the hands of God, He's going to answer them. Now, I hope I can get this out. The last time I saw my brother alive, when I left, I had a prayer with him. And I prayed that Ken would get better. Well, that was on Saturday. Gene called me on Wednesday morning as I'm getting ready to leave and go teach my history classes, and told me he passed. Guess what? My prayer was answered. Wasn't exactly the way I was hoping, but it was answered. He got better. In a hurry. In a hurry. So that's one of the amazing things about God and prayer. Our prayers are sometimes pretty narrow, and we do the best we can. I think that's why we have the Holy Spirit, Tony, to help us with the prayers, because we show there are times we certainly have no idea what to say. But what's in our hearts being communicated? We may fail in words, but we're not failing in heart. And so that's why there is such a power in prayer, and why we need to be people of prayer. I mean, how many folks do we know around here that were doing really, really bad, that are doing really, really better because we prayed for them? People that have lived years that were supposed to die in weeks, and so on. God hears and answers prayer. Now, I'll go back to one. I'm not wanting to start the next section in part, so that's why I'll labor this point one more time. We don't normally count this as a prayer, but when Abraham and God are talking before the angels go down to Sodom and Gomorrah, is that not a prayer? Isn't that what a prayer is? Us talking with God? So Abraham's going to bat for a whole bunch of people. He doesn't even know. He didn't know all those folks. The only thing he knew was his nephew and family were down there, and he didn't want them destroyed with the wicked doers. And so he bargains with God. Now, I don't know that I have ever felt comfortable trying to bargain with God, but obviously Abraham did at that point. And he will get God down to 10 righteous people. Sadly, we couldn't even find that number. But he'll get them down to 10 righteous people. And even though God couldn't find 10 righteous people, he answered Abraham's prayer. What did he do? Lot, get your family out of here. And I don't know if you've read that. Apparently, Lot had some married daughters. Because it talks about his son-in-law, I was thinking he was kind of touched a little bit. But Abraham, I can't answer the prayer the way you want it because there are not enough people, but I will spare your nephew and his family. And so out they go. That's the way God answers prayer. Now, Mark?
We have to remember that God sees the end from the beginning, and we can tell him what we want, and we're given examples in the Bible where our asking can change God's mind on matters. But one of the things that I try to ask God for a lot is that I will have the faith to understand, or even if I don't see it now, that I have faith to understand that the prayer was answered, and that God will one day, that I may be able to see the reasons for it. And
Great example of that is John's prayer at the end of Revelation. And so, Lord Jesus, come. Man, let's get on with this thing. Well, he hadn't come yet. He's going to, but he hadn't come yet. So that prayer is still pending, but it will one day very much be answered.
Jill, we, of course, were asking everybody to pray for Asher when he had his heart surgery. And we were just so thankful that he came through that surgery fine. We were told he would have to have blood pressure medicine probably the rest of his life. And but we felt like, great, God has answered our prayer, we're happy. And then today we got a message from them saying that Asher's blood pressure medicine has been cut in half, and he's doing so well in the next month or two, he may not need it at all. And so I was just thinking, you know, God is still working in Asher's life, and I just considered the prayer was answered. And I always go back to the verse of where he can do more than, immeasurably more than we can even imagine.
Yes, ask for a thing. And of course, we all love Asher for another reason around here. Because there is a certain elder that Asher has completely wrapped around his little finger.
That's true.
And by the way, I will share something with you. Tony and I generally nickname a lot of our kids around here. Asher is smiling. Because I mean, that's the smiling. He walks in and the room lights up. And so that's good news. We're even more thankful. Now, when these prayers are answered, don't forget to be thankful. Don't forget to say thankful. Okay. We'll come back, Lord's willing, next week. We're going to look at humility and pride a little bit. And then we're going to look at perseverance again. So James is going to kind of bounce around. He'll get a topic and he'll leave it a little while and he'll bounce back to it and he'll get a topic and leave it a little while and bounce back to it. So he's going to do a good bit of that as we go through this study. Okay, anything else?
Bill,
Yeah.
on our prayers, we've got to realize, like you mentioned a while ago, the Holy Spirit is there. He's taking our prayers much, much farther than we can. So with the medicine, blood pressure, our prayers may be satisfying with our words, but that Holy Spirit is taking those prayers to places that we cannot even imagine.
I agree. I think you're exactly right. And by the way, if you're not familiar with that latter part of Romans chapter 8, which I think is one of the most fantastic chapters in all Scripture, you've got the Holy Spirit interceding for your prayers, and then you've got Jesus at the right hand of the throne of God interceding for your sins. Man! Is that a double benefit that is astronomically amazing that we have that going on? Joe, would you lead us in a prayer, please?
Father, we don't often know what to say in our prayers, but you want us to come to you and lay our cares on you. And you know what's best for us. And your Son died for our sins, and Father, that's the most ultimate thanksgiving we can give in prayer. As we go leave this place, Father, be with us. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.